What's up, my fellow Shield Bros, and welcome back to the History Armada. I am Shield Bro 6, and I will be your guide today as we take an adventure in A Day in the Life, the Carthaginian Army. So A Day in the Life was a series that I did about 4 years ago now, and I decided I'd bring it back. So for your weekly dose of history, I present to you the Carthaginian Army. We will discuss first the organization, and then the arms and armament used by the typical Carthaginian army. So with that being said, let us begin our journey for today. The army of Carthage itself was composed of heavily armored infantry drawn from the citizenry. This was an elite group of roughly 2,000 to 3,000 infantry soldiers identified by their white shields and known as the Sacred Band, as you can see here from the game Total War Rome 2. The name is copied from the elite army of Greek Thebes and indicates a general move away from Near Eastern practices to a more Hellenization of the Carthaginian military from the 4th century BCE that would be so iconic for Carthage. The Sacred Band was barracked within the massive fortifications and walls of Carthage itself. A second source of troops was the allied cities and conquered territory of North Africa and the territories of Iberia, especially ancient Libya and Tunisia. These would have been led by Carthaginian officers and were paid for their service. As neither of the previous two groups were very numerous or enjoyed a particularly glorious reputation in battle, after all, the Carthaginians were noted more for their navy at the time, a third group of professional mercenaries was relied upon to create an army which could match the enemies of Carthage. These came from all Carthage's allied and conquered states around the Mediterranean, especially Greece, Iberia, Gaul, and southern Italy, such as Sicily. Another notable component of a Carthaginian army in the field was the highly skilled Numidian cavalry, whose riders armed themselves with a javelin and rode without a bridle, for such was their skill in controlling their mount and the connection with their beast. They carried a small shield for protection and also threw long poisoned darts at their enemy. An unusual contingent of mercenaries came from the Libyan Egyptian lands, which fielded women in battle, usually riding the chariots of war. They carried crescent-shaped pelta shields and wielded double-bladed axes, very unique for the time. All of these groups of mercenaries and allied city-states remained a permanent fixture of the Carthaginian standing army from the end of the 3rd century BCE. To avoid the threat that successful mercenary armies took it into their own hands to depose the ruling elite of Carthage and took the city's wealth for themselves, the Carthaginians made sure that all senior and middle command positions within their contingents and allies and mercenaries were held by citizens of Carthage. So to avoid any such issue or mercenary uprisings or settlement, they had those positions of leadership filled by their own people. Nevertheless, despite the precaution, in several instances this did happen. However, that's not what we're talking about today. We can get into the mercenary war of 241 BCE some other time. For today, we are talking about the weapons and armor. So as the armies of Carthage were usually composite groups of Punic, African, and foreign mercenary forces, their weapons and armor differed depending on the unit's origin and their preferences. In addition, the Carthaginians were not averse to equipping themselves with the arms and armor of their fallen enemies or their kind of subjugated enemies. Contact with Greek forces, for instance, in Magna Graecia and Sicily, resulted in the Carthaginians themselves adopting such quintessentially Greek paraphernalia such as the crested bronze Corinthian and Thracian helmets and the heavy hoplite armor. Older style conical helmets were also worn, as were helmets with face masks and metal breastplates covered in leather copied from Cypriot armor. The strengthened linen cuirass, as you can see underneath the chainmail there, protected the lower legs, and they were also styled and studded with bronze bosses with hanging strips, which was also copied from the Greek warriors. However, they also had, like I said, the subjugate armies, such as you can see on the right, the Celtic-Iberian heavy infantry that was utilized. So let us talk about their shields. Shields were circular, more oval-shaped, around 90 centimeters in diameter, or oval with a central vertical rib. Again, this is from Total War Rome 2. Although the Celtic troops, for example, had a narrow rectangular shield of oak, shields were decorated with motifs related to Punic religion, classic motifs such as Medusa, the evil eye, or even personalized, such as Hasdrubal Barca, who had his own portrait on his silver shield. The Carthaginians seem to have dressed up for battle with plenty of gold jewelry and animal skins being worn on top of their armor, especially by the officers. Carthaginian officers would have further stood out in the heat of battle due to their impressive helmet plumes and glinting precious metal armor. Generals often had expensive scale armor, such as that worn by Hannibal, made from gilded bronze scales and inherited from his father, that being Hannibal Barca. So, the typical weapon of use was a sword. It was either a straight blade or a curved single-edged blade, known as the kopis, shown here, or with a dagger as their backup weapon. The Celts they famously used long slashing swords, while the Iberian infantry utilized a distinctive curved sword. Spanish tribes also used a short sword with great effect, something which did not go unnoticed by the Romans, who would later adopt a similar style of swords for themselves, the gladius hispaniensis. I'm sorry, that word is hard for me. But the most common sword for the Carthaginian itinerary was the kopis, shown here. That brings us to the ranged weaponry of the Carthaginian army. Archers were used, especially the skilled Moors and Cretans, shown on the left, but much less in the other army. Bowmen were chiefly employed by the chariots and war elephants to fire down on opposing infantry rapidly. Other weapons of range were also used, such as spears, short javelins, and double-headed throwing axes. Slings were also used to fire lead or stone bullets, which were almond-shaped for maximum penetration into the armor. They were especially used by the deadly mercenary slingers from the Balearic Islands, shown on the right. Artillery was a component of the Carthaginian armies in such as places as Sicily, where the cities were well fortified and well walled. The Carthaginians were quick to adopt the Hellenistic inventions such as the catapult for stones and incendiaries and crossbows. During a siege, they also employed battering rams, mobile siege towers, mounds, and mining to overcome enemy fortification. But we know that Carthage itself was equipped with artillery machines for defense, and here we have a demonstration of those in the center of your screen. Next, that brings us to the war chariots. The Carthaginians employed war chariots up to the 3rd century BCE. These were constructed from wooden frames covered with panels of woven willow branches, and they were single-axle chariots and could carry 2 men, a driver, and an archer or javelin thrower. Sometimes a third man, a hoplite, would join them for defense. The wheels could be fitted with blades so that you could slash through the enemy infantry, and they would be tooled by a team of 2 or 4 horses, which was protected with metal breastplates and oxhide side covers. Like the cavalry, they were used to break up the enemy infantry lines. Needing flat terrain to operate effectively, they were largely restricted to use in North Africa and southern Spain, and went completely out of use by the end of the 3rd century BCE. Lastly, when talking about the armaments of the Carthaginian army, we would be distraught if we did not include the war elephants, which are so iconic of the Carthaginians. These were made quite famous by Hannibal Barca. The Carthaginians used in warfare a now extinct variety of elephant once native to North Africa, which were larger than their modern cousins. Although Hannibal may have used some larger Indian elephants via his ally Ptolemy II of Egypt. Tusked and reaching a height of 2.5 meters, the elephants were made even more fearsome by adding armor to the head and trunk, and sides and blades, or spears, to their tusks and legs. Controlled by their driver, which was called a mahout, they were used to disrupt enemy formations. Not large enough to carry a superstructure or a howdah, this variety elephant may have permitted a second rider, or a team of riders, such as seen here. It wouldn't have kind of the fortifications, but you could see here they might have the walled area where they would be able to house a javelin thrower or an archer. And they were used with of course, the driver armed with the bow or javelins, like I mentioned. Before battles, the elephants would be given fermented wine to make them behave more erratically and increase their trumpeting and stamping. No doubt the appearance and noise of these elephants caused panic amongst the enemy's men and horses, but they were wildly unpredictable in battle and could cause as much damage to their own side as the enemy side. When enemy forces became used to them and trained their horses not to panic in the face of the elephants, or if the terrain was too unsuitable, their effectiveness was greatly reduced, although they will for always be a quite fundamental look to the Carthaginian army and quite famous for their usage and appearance. So with that draws to a close our short episode about a day in the life of the Carthaginian army. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any comments, suggestions, concerns, or if I got something wrong, please let me know in the comment section down below for me. I do read all your comments. If you liked today's episode, please make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button, and if you want me to keep doing these day in the lives, give me some suggestions and let me know. So, that concludes our look into the armament and arms and armor of the Carthaginian army. I hope you enjoyed. As always, this is ShieldBro6 for the History Armada, and I hope y'all have a great week. Thanks for watching.